Hi everyone, this is Wake Up America, Wake Up America channel, and this is Nicole, your host. I'm going to go over an essay that my son wrote today, or that he finished today, that I thought was really, really good information for, even for us adults. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to you guys. It's on the migrant crisis, and who's really being imported and what's really going on there. And I think it's particularly important right now because we have summer coming up, and we all know that Antifa likes to hit the streets when the summer comes and start protesting. And here we've got these Antifa posers out there saying that they're protesting the fascist Nazis. The problem is that the people that they support, right, the Sharia law believing Muslims, such as Donna Hilton, who led the Women's March, who actually raped and murdered a man to death, right? That's the Democrat spokesman. That's their spokesman. So I would like Antifa to just take a moment, if anybody here is willing to actually think about these things, because you want to think about who are the real Nazis, right? Who are the real anti-Semitics? Who really is the problem here? And who are you really protesting? And are you even on the right side? Or are you on the opposite side that you think you're on? Because I think that's what's going on here. Starting in 2015, Europe, sorry guys, I've got allergies right now. Europe has been flooded with millions of migrants from the Muslim world, and in an attempt to emotionally manipulate the public, the mainstream media and the UN have been promoting the blatantly false propaganda that these people are women and children who are fleeing Syria because of the Syrian civil war. That is a lie, by the way. Most of them are not. However, literally everything about this narrative is completely false. According to the UN's own statistics, 59.4% of these migrants are military-aged men, not women and children, and they're not even from Syria. And according to Serbian border police, 90% of the arrivals to Macedonia who claim to be Syrian, 90% who claim to be Syrian, have no documents or ID to prove they are Syrian, but are instead mostly of Pakistani origin. And they aren't even refugees. According to the 1951 Geneva Convention, they defined a refugee as a person who, owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself to the protection of that country. So, basically, they don't qualify as refugees by the Geneva Convention. It's kind of, they're not refugees. And that's the thing. I mean, most of the people who are coming over, when they have these Syrian refugees, when Germany has tried to deport the ones who committed hideous crimes, it turned out that when they tried to send them back to their country of origin, Syria, that they were from Pakistan, as the statistics cite. They were mostly men, by the way, but they were not even from the country, and these other countries wouldn't take them back because they were criminals. So it's, it's one thing to try to shelter some women and children who are fleeing persecution. But that's not what this is, guys. Back to the essay. The attempt to shower us with images of hungry Syrian children seeking asylum for a war-torn country, and able to get us to have sympathy for people who are, in reality, and we're talking, these are military-aged men coming over that are violent and illiterate, and they're not coming to be part of our culture, to assimilate, to take on our values, to be protected by our constitutions. They're coming to overthrow our way of life. They believe that it's all right. The people I'm talking about right now, the extremists I'm talking about, they have no problem with throwing gay people off buildings, stabbing very aged, an old woman in France, a Jewish woman in France who had somehow managed to survive as a little child the Holocaust, got stabbed to death by her neighbor, and a refugee. They were both Muslim. They stabbed her to death, they burned her, they tortured her, and they killed her. France is having such an anti-Semitic, violent problem with the Muslims that it is on par with Nazi Germany. And what is wrong with you kids out there on the street? What's wrong with you? Take a little time to look at what it is that you're actually protesting before you get your ass out there and make a fool of yourself. Okay, anyways, it's blatantly dishonest emotional manipulation on a scale that I don't know if any of us have ever seen. It's no wonder that Europe has been plagued with frequent terrorist attacks since it decided to open up the gates and let the barbarians in. According to Pew, 39% of Afghan Muslims and 13% of Pakistani Muslims think that suicide bombings against civilians are justified. And seeing as though these two countries are where most of these migrants are coming from, it's kind of important where they're coming from. They're not coming from Syria. Because under normal circumstances, when military-aged men enter a country with the intent to kill and subjugate the people that are living in that country, we recognize it as an invasion and not as a refugee crisis. But to add another layer of outrage to this, anyone who dares to question the value of importing millions of violent, illiterate foreigners to mooch on the welfare state and kill off the Jews is then labeled a racist or a xenophobe. In fact, many people have even been arrested in Europe for daring to protest this arrangement under the guise of hate speech. All of this reminds me of the time when Winston Churchill tried to warn the British public of the Nazi aggression, but was prohibited from talking on the radio by the BBC because they said that his views were too controversial. The only difference being that when the Nazis started bombing London, the British people took the threat seriously and started fighting back, like Tony Robinson, rather than doubling down on the censorship and arresting people for being Nazi-phobic, for recognizing the problem. Anifa, think for just a minute here. Look into what these Sharia law-believing Muslims believe, because this is a known thing. They will stone a woman to death for being raped. Is that very liberal and democratic to you? Throwing gay people off buildings because they should be killed? I'm pretty sure a lot of you protesters are gay or LGBT. Think about who you're supporting, because what's going to end up happening is if you win your way, these people that you're supporting are going to come for you first. Okay, so that would be unthinkable back in the day, but not anymore, because European governments today are doing just that. So that whenever these people commit another terrorist attack, we're told that we should just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, as if that's going to solve anything. Or maybe George Soros pays you to get out on the streets, right? And you're an idiot enough to do it. Sadiq Khan, the current mayor of London, has even told Londoners that they should get used to the frequent terrorist attacks. And just give it up, guys. Right? And that they are just part and parcel of living in a big city. Acid attacks are on the rise there too, by the way. This despite the fact that major cities in Japan, China, Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic aren't dealing with regular terrorist attacks. And they're not dealing with this because these countries didn't welcome in millions of foreign invaders who want to kill them. That's how it used to be back in the day. When a country was invaded, they defended themselves from the invaders. This is a phenomenon called self-preservation. And luckily for us, it's beginning to kick in. Thanks to 3 years of aggression on the part of their Muslim invaders, 55% of Europeans want to ban all immigrants from Muslim-majority countries. And yet their politicians are continuing to import more migrants. You know what's really unfortunate about this, guys, is that you should go look on the internet and look at Iran before we overthrew their government and toppled it back in the, go look at pictures from the 1950s with Iranian women going to college, being educated. They didn't have, a full bee suit, beekeeper's costume on and a hijab or any of this. No. But I'm going to admit something to you right here midway through the essay, and that is that the United States of America with the UK, they have plotted to destabilize these countries in order to radicalize the Muslims and then send them into our countries, right? And overthrow our governments and our constitution. And that's part of the problem. We've created part of this problem. But the answer is not importing them. That's not the answer. Okay. Anyone who dares to express this view is labeled as intolerant and can even be arrested for a hate crime. Meanwhile, hold on, the power just went off on this. 1 second. I'll have to chop this out later because I can't. The computer just went dead. Well, there may have to be a part 2. We'll see. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and record the rest of this. If this computer doesn't fire up, I'm going to do it in 2 parts. Let's talk. It's summer again, and soon George Soros's paid flunkies will be out on the streets. I think they protest out in Israel, from what I understand, too, right? Out by the Gaza Strip. Now, I don't know if you guys, while the computer's booting up, I don't know if you guys remember this, but back in the day, it used to be that when I would read the newspaper, the LA Times, as a matter of fact, they would show pictures of the Muslim terrorists and what they had done, and they would put these pictures on the front cover of, believe it or not, the LA Times back in the 90s, showing the carnage that was left behind, a baby shoe that had been blown off of an infant Jewish baby because they had gone to a synagogue on the Sabbath, and the Muslims would blow up the buses with the women and children on it, and just baby parts all over the streets. Because they used to do this thing where the terrorists would actually target women and children, Israelis, particularly on the Sabbath, and then when Israel retaliated in any way, then they would get framed as being these hideous people. Well, guys, I'm sorry, but if these were Christian invaders doing the same thing, Christians used to do all this stuff. I would be the first person to say, don't let a dang one of them in here. Not a one. Not a one. So it's not, and not all Muslims, by the way, are terrorists, clearly. Some of them are good people. But we're talking about the crisis that's being coordinated by our governments. Because they want a one-world government, so they can control everybody. And the computer's back up now. But we should all be thanking God Hillary was not elected either, because I guarantee you that not only would we already be in war, she would have thoroughly continued to assist Iran and these other, radicals that are throughout the countryside over there, and it would have been really bad for Israel. It would have been really bad for us, and England would have been probably very happy, and the Pope of Rome would have been probably very happy with Hillary as well. Okay, so where are we here? Okay, anybody who dares to express this view is labeled as intolerant and can even be arrested for a hate crime. Meanwhile, the Muslims are committing actual hate crimes against the Jews and the Sikhs, from stabbing an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor to death, torturing her, to blowing up a Sikh temple. The Sikhs are of an Indian religion, and sometimes people mistake them for Muslims, and they're not. Actually, the Sikhs are a very persecuted population in England. So once again, for all of you Anifa people, go find out what a Sikh is. It's spelled S-I-K-H, okay? Look up what's happened in England to the Sikhs, because Muslims actually like to go after the Sikhs and get their daughters and rape them and kill them. Actually, here's a good one for you. Muslim shop owners in England actually had a butcher shop with meat, and they had their son and some teenage kids go out and lure this little girl. This happened in England, and lured her over. They killed her. The family put the meat and ground it into their meat and ended up selling that meat to the parents of that little girl. These are sickos, man. Down in Texas, it was like last year, 2 years ago, there was a Muslim couple that had actual slaves, sex slaves, human slaves, to do their labor that they felt entitled to, and they were actually, when they got busted by the police in court, they were trying to do a religious protection for themselves to not get in trouble for that. It should really concern all of us. Okay, so it's been demonstrated who the hateful, intolerant bigots are, besides Antifa. And this is why the German Secret Service has warned the German government that they were importing Islamic anti-Semitism and extremism. And it's definitely not the women and children that are getting to the head of the line, guys, in these countries. In fact, women and children that get in these kinds of lines for food, for being, to go get protection in another country, the women and children get jacked out of the food, they get raped, they get attacked. So it's just the military-aged violent men that we're mostly taking in. Go to San Diego, to the outskirts of San Diego. There's an entire city there. We'll get into that some other time. I used to go out there and I talked to some of the young Muslim girls. They're living, it's right outside of San Diego in El Cajon. There are young girls living out there who are having forced genital mutilation. They're living in these apartment complexes with all their refugees' parents, and they're trying to go to high school and everything. And they're being abused, and they're not being allowed the rights they should have as American citizens or even as legal immigrants. It's being held back from them here in San Diego, and you notice you'll never see nothing. You're going to see nothing about that on the news, guaranteed. They're not being treated. If they are going to come here into this country, then they should be afforded, the women and children, some decent amount of protections, I think, from their own relatives. Okay, so back here. The German secret police had warned the German government that they were importing Islamic anti-Semitism and extremism. So just so all you Antifa know, you're supporting the anti-Semites. George Soros himself was a Nazi collaborator. He says he doesn't feel bad about it either. He helped to identify the people who had a lot of expensive furniture and things that the Nazis wanted and showed them which houses to take. He said he didn't feel any sympathy about that. And that warning about this is not baseless fear-mongering, as some would like to claim. Because ISIS themselves have said that they intend to send 500,000 terrorists to Europe by infiltrating the migrant population. So you've got ISIS actually saying, we're going to infiltrate the migrant population. We have a goal, is what ISIS is saying, to kill 500,000 terrorists, 500,000 Europeans by infiltrating the migrant population. Do you hear about that on the news? Because I don't think so. And according to the Anti-Semitism Index, the most anti-Semitic area in the world is the Middle East and Northern Africa, where 74% of people hold anti-Semitic views. Take that, Antifa, please. You know what? I know a lot of you guys are you're misguided. But back when I was younger and I was a protester and I was a punk rocker, I knew what the heck I was protesting. And in fact, your friends and people would come question you if you didn't know what the heck. They'd just call you a poser and say you were stupid. Like, come on. Please don't go along with the show. Join our side. I'll help you. I can actually teach you how to gather information on Antifa from the inside and on your BAM group, right? That's ran as a cult. I've read extensively about that. It's a cult. It's a full-on cult. You don't see any government. They're violating black children, taking them out of their families and out of their homes and forcing them to stay in these situations and protest for Antifa. Some of these kids are not there because they want to. Some of them are actually there because they don't have a dang choice, because they're using the school system in the state of California. They're using the social workers. They're using a bunch of different forces here in California and enabling BAM, which is kidnapped children out of their homes and put them in these group homes out here to do their bidding. So, and you'll never hear. This is a well-known fact, but you're never going to hear about this on the local news. Not all these Antifa kids, by the way. So not all of them are there because they even want to be there. Okay, so back to where we're at here. They have also been attacking, these are the migrants, attacking and sexually assaulting women across the European continent, although European governments have been trying to cover this up. In fact, on New Year's Eve in 2016, migrants sexually assaulted over 2,000 women in one night. Sweden even had to cancel its music festival because of the mass sexual assaults that occurred the previous year. And yet the EU and the UN have been promoting the idea that letting these people in will enrich our culture and promote tolerance. When in fact, the fact of the matter is that these people are the ones that are mostly coming over. I'm not saying every single one, okay, because there's always an exception. But the ones that our governments are trying to import are not the women and children that need aid, guys. They're the ones who are coming in here to overthrow our way of life. And they will rape your women and your daughters. Look at the Yiditsi girls. What do the terrorists do in the Yiditsi Mountains? They kidnap the young girls. They take them back to where their camps are. They videotape the torture and the rape to death of these girls. They chop their bodies in little pieces, put them in a black plastic bag, and take them over and put them on their parents' doorsteps to watch the torture with the videotape of the torture. Okay, this has been testified at UN meetings out in San Diego. It's been testified across the United States. This is a fact. Fact. No argument. Think about who you're supporting. The sad news is the people who are being imported are often violent. They come with a political agenda, with military training, and unfortunately have an average IQ of 84, which kind of puts you in the, when your IQ falls below a certain level, guys, you don't function in a democracy properly. In fact, a population has to have a certain level of an IQ, above 84, by the way, to function properly as any kind of democracy or republic. Once it goes under a certain line, it's monarchy. Okay? So, unless you want to have our population, you want to bring a bunch, you're specifically targeting the stupidest of the population to bring in here so that we won't have a republic or a democracy because, well, it will require a monarchy to police the people. That's very sad. That's why we shouldn't be trying to bring democracy to their countries either. If they have a royalty, they have a king in place, leave them there. Leave them there. Okay, so they even rioted and burned down their own migrant center because they weren't getting enough Nutella and gummy bears, causing over 10 million euros worth of damage. That's no bueno. Ever since these people started coming into Europe, they have acted as if they are somehow entitled to everything that the Europeans own. And that if they don't give it to them, then they somehow have the right to riot and destroy property. Also, the acid attacks are on the rise out there. It's not like this is completely unprecedented. Sorry, I've got allergies today. We have tons of pollen everywhere. It's not like this is completely unprecedented. When the Muslim Barbary pirates at Tripoli were stealing American ships and kidnapping American sailors, Thomas Jefferson was sent out to negotiate with the ambassador for the Barbary states. Jefferson recorded the following. We took the liberty to make some inquiries concerning the grounds of their pretensions, to make war upon the nations who had done them no injury, and observed that we considered all mankind as our friends, who had done us no wrong, nor had given us any provocation. The ambassador answered us, that it was founded upon the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Koran, that all nations should not acknowledge their authority were sinners, and that it was their right and duty to make war upon them whenever they could be found, and to take slaves of all they could as prisoners, and that every Muslim, who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise with hundreds of virgins. Okay, so that's the end of the quote. So despite what the EU and UN have been saying, any basic study of history will show us that diversity is actually not, too much diversity is not a strength, okay? Nicola Machiavelli wrote, this is a little quote from Machiavelli here. No more accent, though. From the readiness wherewith the Romans conferred the right of citizenship on foreigners, there came to be so many new citizens of Rome, and possessed of so large a share of the suffrage, that the government itself began to alter, forsaking those courses with which it was accustomed to follow, and growing estranged from the men to whom it had before looked for guidance, which being observed by Fabius, when censor, he caused all those new citizens to be classified into 4 tribes, that being reduced within this narrow limit, they might not have in their power to corrupt the entire state. And this was wisely contrived measure, for without introducing any violent charge, it supplied a convenient remedy, and was so acceptable to the Republic as to gain Fabius the well-deserved name of Maximus. And that is a quote from a discourse. I'm going to put the quotes and the links will go up below this video within 24 hours of me putting it up. Here we are. But of course, these guys are probably going to claim that Machiavelli was an alt-right Nazi, and a bigot, to boot, for recognizing that if you want to have a country, you can't just let in millions of foreigners who hate you, who are trying to overrun and overthrow your native population. People whose cultures and values are completely incompatible with ours, and who have no intention whatsoever of integrating. That's key. That's key, guys, because in the past, it's always been, And this is the case even for right now for people who are legally migrating from Mexico. I've had friends who've gone through this process. You have to understand the Constitution. You have to actually want to be part of the United States of America. You have to want to acclimate. You have to desire to have that type of culture. You can have your own religion, but your religion is under the Constitution. So if your religion says you could rape women, well, the Constitution says you can't. And hopefully the citizens get a hold of you and stone you to death. That's just my, okay. Anyways, just kidding. These rich multiculturalists culturalists like George Clooney, who, by the way, lives in a huge gated thing, and he doesn't invite any, you're going to hear people say this all the time, but George Clooney he lives in gated property. No migrant could get to him. Of course he's going to say this. Not only that, but everybody in Hollywood, come on. We all know they're on the hook. They're not the most talented. They're not the best. They're the people who have no moral scruples of their own, who don't think for themselves and will say whatever they're told, right? They're just puppets. That's why they're not talented anymore and all of our movies suck. Because they're just appointing the people who will go along with the show and say whatever it is that the people who want to, have a one world government and have all the Muslims rape and kill us, and
they're clowns.
They're clowns. They are clowns.
He had a chapter in Zarathustra where he made fun of those guys, and he said, well, the average idiot looks up to a bunch of clowns. And
yeah.
In today's times,
average idiot looks up to a bunch of clowns. Yeah. Very good. This is the guy who wrote the essay, by the way. So, okay, back to where we were here. So these multiculturalists like George Clooney or J.K. Rowling, who want us to import more and more Muslims, are just like the aristocrats near the end of the Roman Empire, who thought that it would be a great idea to open up the gates and let the barbarians in to flood Rome and plunge us into dark ages for the next 400 years. By the way,
we go into the dark ages for the next 400 years. Collapse Rome and put us in the dark ages.
400 years. No, thank you. And these people who, as a result of living under the safest conditions in human history, by the way, that's us, okay? We guys, we live under the safest conditions in human history. It has completely separated and segregated us from understanding how dangerous this is. We've lost, because of living under these safe conditions, we've lost any and all survival instincts. It is beyond their comprehension, our comprehension, how anyone could possibly want to harm us because we have virtually no understanding of history. And it's true. And since they have never been exposed to the barbary present in these countries, they think that the Muslims are just like everyone living in Western countries. And guys, they're not. And unfortunately, our country had something to do with that, but importing them and destabilizing their cultures is not the answer. Eastern Europeans now know better than this because they had to live under Soviet occupation. So if you live under occupation by another country who's oppressing you, you will understand the dangers a little bit more. America, we haven't had foreign occupation, but we're going into it if we keep this fun stuff up. I'm glad that Trump's not, he seems to be putting a kibosh on that. They know that being invaded by foreigners is neither fun nor is it enriching, as Angela Merkel claims. They know this because the Soviet bloc only collapsed 27 years ago in 1991. Most of them still remember what it was like to live under authoritarian rule. This is the reason why Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic have refused to admit any of these migrants, despite the EU trying to force them to do it. To them, an authoritarian superstate, in this case the EU trying to send millions of invaders into their country and arresting anyone who dissents, sounds all too familiar. We need to recognize, like Poland has, that Islam is not this peaceful, wonderful religion that George Clooney tries to portray it as. Was literally founded by a genocidal maniac and a con man. Spread his religious ideas at the end of a sword. So if you want to know who came up with Islamic terrorism, it was a guy named Muhammad. And by the way, Muhammad advocated that it's perfectly okay to lie in order to overthrow a country and murder them in their sleep. The Israelis understand this all too well because they've lived next door to these people for the past 70 years. That's why they have borders. And that's why they haven't let in any new refugees. Any of the, they're not letting these non-refugees in. So maybe we should take a hint from Israel and stop importing Muslims. And also, Let's stop destabilizing their countries because, the sanctions that caused the death of 500,000 Iraqi children, unacceptable. That makes us terrorists too, It's not, let's not enable this anymore. Let's just put a stop to it. Let's have some common sense here. Anyways, this is not a poke against, all Muslims. There's some Muslims that are good people. But, just like Christians were homicidal maniacs that really, the entire religion was, taken over by Constantine. Because it gave Rome a lot of good control over the people. Just like this Muslim religion's being used right now.
Christians were spreading Christianity all across the world by force until World War I, where like the Christian empires annihilated each other.
You want to say a little closer so people could hear you?
Christians were going around the world, colonizing and forcing people into Christianity until World War I, when the Christian empires were eliminated.
Right.
They eliminated each other.
Good thing!
And the Ottoman Empire, too. That was actually a good thing in the long run, because the Ottoman Empire was the continuation of the caliphate that was put in place by Muhammad. And it was also collapsed by World War I. So World War I was where the Muslim caliphates and the Christian empires just eliminated each other and then got replaced by republics.
And now they need to overthrow the republics in order to get things back under control again. So we need to fight that, guys. If you're a peaceful Muslim, because I know I have subscribers, I look through my statistics, and I actually have people... there's a small percentage of my subscribers are actually from some of these countries. Syria. I think there's some from different countries in the Middle East. You know who you are if you're there. Also, on my statistics shows that you guys watch my videos all the way through, as opposed to the Americans and the Canadians who watch. But my videos aren't that great. They have scary lighting that make me look, frightening and all that. But the reality is that I know that this is not the case with all the people who live in the Middle East, and this is not the case of every Muslim, okay? But the people who want to establish a new world order, they don't care about the Muslims. They don't care about the Jews. In fact, they see the Jews as major potential dissidents. That's why I think that's one of the reasons why Nazi Germany took them out, And keep in mind, the people who are funding this migrant crisis and trying to get this going, and funding Antifa and the riots, right? If you go back into it, these are the same banking families that orchestrated Nazi Germany and funded that. We all have to wise up a little bit. This essay here was written by my son, and this is the reason why, by the way, the state does not want... This is why the state wants your kids in public school. Because you put them in public school, they get brainwashed. Put them in public college without having learned anything before they went into college, they're just going to get brainwashed by liberal professors who have an agenda. And they literally, in public school, my mom was a school teacher in California. My Uncle Gary, he worked for, he was a senior policy advisor for Bill Clinton. Helped to write the, I think it was Chapter 11, Agenda 21 for, forestation kind of stuff. But the point here is that from knowing my own mother and her working in California in the school districts, there was huge problems. When teachers had conservative values, the school district would go after them before they even got their tenure to get them out. They didn't want them. However, the Palm Springs Unified School District, which had a scandal in the 1990s in which all of the heads of that district had been putting all kinds of nasty pornography online, and the kids were somehow interacting online, they covered that all up, right? These people, the principals that work in these school districts in California, some of them actually make some of these one of my mom's female principals, because my mom was one of the representatives for the union, female principal that my mom worked under for a while, had actually... All the, when school teachers come in, they're put in on a temporary thing in the first year or two where they're not a permanent teacher. They're not guaranteed a position there yet. And if these young school teachers just getting out of college did not sleep with this female principal, she would not let them come back, and she never got busted for it. She got fired for something else, okay? Because there's cover-ups. Keep your kids out of public school, and hopefully we can educate some of you. If there are any of you Antifa out there watching this, or anybody who's a member of BAM, I do know a bit about helping you to get out safely. You can email me privately on the About page, and I will give you some tips on how to get out of there safely, how to gather evidence for your own self, for your own protection, so that you can leave that cult and have somewhere to go afterwards. I know how to help you. And you can still be involved in politics. But you don't need to be under this kind of oppression. I know how these people are. They're bad news, okay? They're bad news. They're controlling bitches out there. A lot of these are women that are did not have their own children, and they're working for someone for money, and they have an agenda, and they don't care whose lives they destroy. So contact me if you are a part of Antifa or BAM and you would like some assistance and some information on how to safely get yourself out, or if you would like to tell your story, that's fine. I'm not going to share any stories of anybody who doesn't give me permission. Take care, everybody. I hope you have a good week. I'll go back to my series on religion probably this Sunday.